So hello everyone, I hope you're all well. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar in which we'll be discussing global extended producer responsibility regulations and in which countries they apply to professional use or B2B products. My name is Lisa Dean. I'm head of the global compliance team within Sfera EC4P, and I'm joined by my colleague James Pearson, who is the product director for EC4P. So we'll start by giving you a brief introduction to our company, and then we'll take a look at which countries have EPR regulations in place which apply to B2B products. And we'll focus in on the regulations in 5 countries. So that's Australia, Turkey, South Korea, Russia, and New Zealand. And we'll be specifically looking at the e-waste type regulations in these countries. And then James will take you through a demonstration of our online reporting platform, ec4p.com, which can help you maintain EPR compliance at a global level. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. So to introduce you to Sfera, we are a global provider of integrated risk management software and information services. Our key service areas are environmental health and safety, operational risk management, and product stewardship. Sfera EC4P is part of the product stewardship service area, which specialises in product compliance, recycling compliance, CE marking, regulatory content, chemical and hazardous material management, and SDS authoring and consulting. So to provide you with a brief introduction of Sfera EC4P's industry background, we have extensive experience in WEEE batteries, packaging, RoHS and REACH. For example, in 2003, we wrote the UK government guidelines on the RoHS and WEEE directives to explain practical compliance requirements to UK companies. And in 2007, we were the first organisation to gain authorisation to operate a UK government-approved WEEE compliance scheme, B2B WEEE scheme. And our global WEEE batteries and packaging services were launched in 2013. And then in 2014, our web-based registration and reporting platform, ec4p.com, was established, which James will provide more detail on later in the webinar. And in 2019, our company joined Sfera. So many EPR regulations that we see outside of the EU only tend to apply to kind of consumer use or B2C products. And often the product scope of these regulations are quite limited, usually to IT products and televisions. However, an increasing number of countries do include professional use or B2B products in their e-waste regulations. So some countries such as Turkey have actually the same product scope as the EU WEEE Directive. And this map just provides an overview of some of these non-EU countries where EPR regulations apply to both B2C and B2B. And as I've already mentioned, in today's webinar, we'll be focusing on the e-waste EPR regulations in the 5 countries which I've highlighted here. And the first being Australia. So the product stewardship televisions and computers regulations, they came into force at the end of 2011. The regulations don't distinguish between household and non-household products. The regulations apply to IT equipment and televisions. And Schedule 1D of the regulations contains a full list of products that fall into scope, along with their product import codes. This will be quite helpful in identifying whether your specific products fall in scope. The regulations define a liable party as a person who has manufactured, imported, distributed or used a product in Australia. So there are a few exemption thresholds under the regulations, and these are 5,000 units of televisions, 5,000 units of computers and printers, or 15,000 units of computer products imported or manufactured in Australia in the previous financial year. And so just to note here that actually computers which are manufactured or assembled in Australia are not covered under the regulations. However, computers which are imported into Australia are covered. This is just because computer parts which are imported into Australia are already kind of covered under the regulations, so the manufacturer of computers doesn't apply. And liable parties under these regulations will actually receive written notification from the government that they must join a co-regulatory agreement. So the National Television and Computer Recycling Scheme was also established in 2011, and it provides households and small businesses with access to free industry-funded collection and recycling services for the televisions, computers, printers and computer products. And liable parties are required to pay for a proportion of this recycling through membership to a co-regulatory arrangement. And it's worth mentioning here that although professional use products are covered under the regulations, a co-regulatory arrangement or the recyclers that they partner with may refuse commercial quantities of e-waste or require payment for the collection and recycling of them. There are currently 4 approved co-regulatory arrangements in operation in Australia, and these arrangements are responsible for the running of the National Recycling Scheme, including organising the collection and recycling of e-waste on behalf of their liable party members. Fines can be issued to those companies who are not a member of a co-regulatory arrangement, and these penalties can increase for each day the company remains out of compliance. And on top of this, ministers may also decide to publicise the name of offending companies. So on to Turkey. So Turkey is aligning its producer responsibility legislation with the EU legislation as part of its accession negotiations to the EU. The scope of products covered under the e-waste regulations in Turkey is exactly the same as the scope of products covered under the EU WEEE Directive, and this includes both B2B and B2C equipment. And liable parties are responsible for financing the collection and recycling of end-of-life equipment. And as under the EU WEEE Directive, liable parties are those who place the product onto the market the first time. The requirements of the regulations differ for B2B and B2C products. So all producers are required to register, submit a WEEE compliance declaration form and put on the market data to the Ministry of Environment and Forestry each year. And as per the EU WEEE Directive, products must be labelled with a crossed-out wheelie bin. But producers of domestic or B2C equipment are also required to meet collection targets. These targets are set annually and they're set in kilograms per capita within 6 different collection groups. Producers can choose to comply individually, in which case the Ministry will evaluate WEEE management plans and declarations, or producers can choose to join a WEEE compliance scheme. And for non-compliant parties, the Ministry will take enforcement action as under Law 2872, which includes prohibiting sales of products if compliance measures are not put in place. and fines of up to 1 million liras, which can double if the offence reoccurs. So in South Korea, the Act on the Promotion and Recycling of Resources covers both B2B and B2C equipment, but small companies with an annual turnover below 1 billion South Korean won and importers with a turnover below 300 million South Korean won are exempt from the Act. Again, there are differences in the requirements for B2B and B2C equipment. So collection of end-of-life professional use equipment is not mandatory. However, some producers may want to collect B2B waste to help meet their collection targets, which are applied each year. Producers who fail to meet collection targets are subject to fines, and there is an annual reporting requirement for all product types under the Act. So liable parties can join a PRO to meet requirements, or if they choose to comply individually, submit a recycling action plan and performance results to the Ministry, and ensure that recycling is carried out as per the methods specified by the Ministry. The Act for Resource Recycling of E and Vehicles consolidates producer responsibility provisions on E and also introduces a framework for eco-design and substance restrictions. So we'll just be focusing on the EPR provisions for E here. The Act takes precedence over any other acts with regards to the promotion of recycling of E and vehicles. And the Act covers an extensive range of products, which are categorised into the 5 groups shown here. The list was extended recently with effect from January of this year to now cover 52 e-products, which include products such as computers, printers, scanners, fax machines and routers. Producers are required to meet national recycling rates, provide recyclability information to recyclers, and ensure recycling is carried out in accordance to the recycling methods and standards set by the Ministry. Liable parties can join a recycling mutual aid association, which is similar to an EU WEEE compliance scheme, or choose to comply individually. And the party taking on the responsibility to recycle must provide information on how they will fulfil the obligations and also carry out reporting. Audits and inspections, they're usually carried out within a period of 7 days notice. However, an inspection without notice is permitted where deemed to be necessary. And there are a range of penalties listed under the Act for various offences. These range between 1 million and 30 million South Korean won. So in Russia, the federal law on waste from production and consumption came into force in 2015 and applies to both B2B and B2C equipment. The product scope of the law is quite broad within the categories listed on this slide. So there's no registration requirement under the law. However, producers and importers must report annual put on the market data, and producers can fulfil their collection obligation by establishing their own take-back programme, or by forming associations or entering into contracts with regional operators, or they can pay an environmental fee for each product that they place on the market in Russia. And producers are also required to make declarations which include business information such as tax and economic activity IDs, and product information according to HS custom codes. So exemptions apply in a number of cases. For example, if a trademark owner provides raw materials to a manufacturer, and the right of ownership to the manufactured goods belongs to the trademark owner, the EPR liability would lie with the trademark owner. However, if a manufacturer sells the manufactured goods to a trademark owner, the manufacturer is the liable party responsible for fulfilling the EPR obligations. And if products are imported for a company's own needs, then no EPR liability arises. And the EPR obligations do not apply to components and raw materials, and they do not apply to products which are not placed on the market in Russia. So there are no annual registration fees in Russia. Producers who do not self-comply and don't set up their own recycling take-back arrangements, they're subject to an environmental product fee, which are charged on a per unit or weight basis. And these producers are also required to submit an environmental fee calculation form and proof of payment. An exemption to the environmental fee may apply to producers who establish their own take-back programs or who enter into a recycling contract with a specialised contractor. And as this formula shows here, this is how the payable fee is calculated. So it's based on the tax rate, the volumes of products placed onto the market, and the collection target rate. And non-compliance with the law can result in disciplinary, administrative, criminal or civil liability. And those who don't meet the waste licensing requirements can face fines of between 170,000 and 250,000 Russian rubles. And in New Zealand, under the Waste Minimisation Act, New Zealand recently announced a priority products notice, so that was in July of this year. The list of products contains the same scope as the EU WEEE Directive, which covers both B2B and B2C products. So once a product is declared as a priority product in New Zealand, a product stewardship scheme must be set up. So we can expect to see product stewardship schemes for WEEE, batteries and packaging in New Zealand within the near future. The Ministry for the Environment will consult with those who may be affected by the regulations before any new regulations are passed. And a possible outcome could be that the sale of a priority product may be prohibited unless the producer operates in accordance with an accredited scheme. So just a quick summary of what we've covered so far. Many countries include B2B products within their EPR regulations. Some countries mirror the product scope of the EU WEEE Directive. So if your product falls in scope within the EU, it's likely that you'll be obligated within these non-EU countries. There can be fewer requirements for B2B products in comparison to B2C products under the same regulation. For example, mandatory collection of B2B products may not apply. And the number of EPR regulations are increasing at a global level, and producers should be aware that more and more countries are expanding the scope of these regulations to include professional use products. So it's definitely worth monitoring these developments. So I'm just going to try and hand over to James now, who will introduce you to ec4p.com.